Morning, everybody. Great to have you with us. Pat, what's the day look like?
All right. So basically, I'm going to go, well, I'll just bring up some slides here. I'm going to go through kind of the same sequence I went through last time because, we're still talking about the same big topic areas and then hit any questions you guys have at the end. If you've got questions about what I'm throwing up in the slides, throw them in the chat or raise your hand. Either way, let me get let me share. All right. So, like I said, I'm going to go through some of these things, just some of the big points. Things I think are important about the different lessons and the modules that you went through in Performance Breathing 2, and then hit any questions you guys have. The obviously the assessments and the for the actual breathing assessments as well as the neuro assessments, the range of motion things. No change there for this for Performance Breathing 2 from Performance Breathing 1. It's the same thing. I did want to ask if you doing the neuro assessments, the kind of range of motion where you kind of pick a range of motion and stuff like that. Is that something that seemed easy for you guys to do, like easy to utilize or easy to utilize with athletes?
I think for me, I mean, it's super simple. I always do the toe touch one, and I feel like most of my athletes could do that because they have minimal range of motion in the posterior
Right.
chain. So I just picked one and stuck with one that was working. So once I did that, I mean, it was just super simple, and I could do it each time. So yeah, intuitive.
Yeah, good. I've like in the clinic, the toe touch and then the torso rotation where you're putting your hands together and you're rotating are like 90% of what I use because they're quick and easy. People can replicate them if they want to be using them at home and stuff like that. Um, so it's a fairly easy thing to do. And it's funny, 14 years ago when I started in like Z Health and kind of learned that, it was like, wow, this is great. This is so easy. I can do this myself. I can, and you're seeing it out there a lot more now. Like, in the interweb. And
Well, it fascinates me too that I mean, once you bridge to that connection in PB1 of like the neurological response to an action, like you going to the store and trying on shoes. Now I do that with a bunch of different stuff. I'm like, oh, I wonder how this is impacting my body or how this workout has impacted my body or this move or whatever. So I just kind of experiment with it too. And it's so simple to now bridge those actions with a neurological response. And I think there's just a lot of different ways that we can use it with our athletes too.
knowing what your normal baseline kind of toe touch is, because after you do it for a while, you always kind of know, like, oh, I'm a little off today, or about normal today, and then sit at the computer for an hour, and it's so that's when you realize it's not just the physical aspect, it's that the stress of doing things and stuff like that, just overall threat level that's going on. All right.
Pat, how much time do you spend, whether it's in the clinic, on figuring it out, or do you just stick with those two? Those two assessments work, and that's that. Like, again,
Well,
dealing with a big group, like a football roster.
right. Like, so most of my time, the clinic's are one-on-one, right? So
Sure.
it's if someone's coming in with a specific issue, I'm going to do some kind of assessment around that issue. So if they're shoulder range or they have shoulder pain, right? And they can only bring their shoulder up to here, and then they're like, "Ow, it hurts." Okay, well, that's our assessment, right? We're going to do something to see if you can get to here before it hurts, right? And that's telling me that your brain likes what we're doing, right? And the opposite, obviously, if you get less range of motion, I know I've kind of found the threatening thing, right? Whether it's a joint that we're moving or some other kind of neurological input. So with a one-on-one in the clinic, it's usually very specific to the issue they're coming in. So, and sometimes people have problems verbalizing and really have an idea. And so I have to like, well, what can you not do? And then they'll be like, well, I can't go downstairs without pain. Okay. And so I'll set some things up in the gym where they have to step down or step up, whatever their issue is, and try to replicate as close as I can to something functional or activities of daily life that are affecting them. If you have a group of athletes, that's when the things like toe touch or torso rotation really are really the big ones. And I just tell people, we do toe touch. I'm like, hey, does anybody already know they can put their palms on the ground? You'll have, one or two raise their hand. Okay, you're doing the other one, right? Teach a couple, for those who are super bendy. But yeah, in the big groups, it's a lot easier. That's what we did when we were at the Air Force Academy volleyball team. We just used a couple like that. We actually use a specific, Mike probably remembers, we did a jump test to assess some drills. So we bought a bunch of Post-it notes and Sharpies, right? And we had them draw their jersey number on the Post-it note, and then they went up to the side wall and they just did a standing squat jump. They jump and hit the slap the Post-it note on the wall. And then we did some, I think was it vision drills we were doing, Mike? Yeah, we did a couple vision drills and then had them go back, right, get a new one and jump up and see if they got farther, which most of them actually did. So that you can use performance-oriented stuff too, if, depending on the setup you've got. All right, so breathing mechanics this time, we were doing the serratus anterior muscle, right? That you see the picture of it there, and we showed it in the course. Pretty big muscle going all the way down inside all the ribs and connected to the inside of the scapula. And this is one of the things that really got interesting to me when we talk about breathing, because everyone's at least heard of the diaphragm, even if they can't visually picture what it looks like or even what it does. You kind of know diaphragm breathing. But because those lungs are just bags that only move when the rib cage changes its volume, right? All the muscles that connect around the ribs and the sternum and to the spine are really affecting that. So as we want to be able to control our breathing better and to control how much air we can take in, then we want to start having knowledge of those muscles and being able to use them and breathe into them. With the breathing mobility, we were doing the lateral thoracic glides. And I just wanted to ask you guys if you found difficulty in either of these two exercises, trying to do them.
I found my lateral thoracic glides were very minimal. Like it was a very tight range of motion. And I was like, oh, without me throwing a hip and trying to compensate for that, to stay true to just the glide. I found that challenging. It's gotten better with practice, but initially I was like, man, this one's actually hard for me not to try to compensate and get a little more better range.
It's a weird movement, right? It's not something we do in an individual movement very often, glide over like that.
Yeah.
But with a lot of folks, I've found that one, even though it is hard. I mean, both the thoracic mobility drills are actually somewhat difficult for people initially because we're not used to moving that part of our spine individually or by itself. But the lateral thoracic glides, a lot of times once people start to get it, then it starts to feel really like they feel like everything up here moves better once you're getting that motion of the vertebrae moving laterally like that.
It's really fun too to play games with your body. Like I'll do a really deep nasal inhale, and then as I hold it, then I'll do a thoracic glide. So now I've got a different volume throughout my chest, and I can start to manipulate my spine. I can get a better pop in my vertebra by taking an inhale, holding it, and then moving in those directions. So as you continue to progress, you really start to create, oh, the breathing with the mobility, with an adjustment, with how I understand and assess. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's really about creating options, right? You know, you know, as far as just, if obviously we're just talking about breathing now, right? But as far as breathing goes, if you own the mobility in the joints that are relative to breathing, if you own control over the ability to contract the muscles, then, you know, you could be, you know, for wrestlers, this is always one I bring up, right? You could be in a position where, man, it's hard to move. We're all tied up, you know. Maybe I'm getting cradled right now or something, right? But I need to be able to breathe. And can I breathe into the side, right, so that I can get a breath and calm down for a second, and then start to be able to react, right? This stuff's really great for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because, you know, that's a little bit more of a little more slow moving than you know, wrestling in a sense, but you end up in these weird positions for longer because it's not quite as fast paced. So it becomes a really powerful tool.
Pat, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
I've done breath work for years and years and years, right? But I've never incorporated any movement patterns into breath work. And so when I do that, it's like my brain shuts it down. It's like I feel so incredibly awkward with any movement that I try to initiate with breath work. Help me understand what's going on and how to resolve that.
Can you give me an example of what you're trying to do?
Like when you like speaking about the lateral thoracic glides and stuff, like I'm so used to like being sedentary and motionless when I do my breath work, other than just my breathing patterns. So when I incorporate movement with it, it just seems so distracting that it's sort of like now all of a sudden it breaks the breathing patterns.
Right. So great point. This was one of my issues with a lot of the breathing stuff that's out there, actually. I don't have the study. So I'm gonna not quote it because I don't have it, but Dr. Cobb at Z Health had talked about this study where they took a yogi from India who like did all this incredible breath work and you know, I'm not even gonna pronounce all the Hindi words on, you know, pranayama breathing and all that stuff in through one nostril, out there. And a lot of that stuff has some validity, right? And some science behind it. Especially the alternate nostril breathing. But he was a guru, literally, on breathing and stuff, right? And they're like, okay, so we're going to put you on this treadmill, and now we're going to have you start running. And he couldn't do any of it, what he normally did, right? So it had his, you know, in that sense, that kind of breathing has the good effects on your autonomic nervous system, like we talked last time, you know, and ramping up or ramping down, bringing you more parasympathetic. But can you use it when you need it? That was my thing. Like, can you use it when you need it? So so I'm going to give you two examples, right? In just basic movement, in a sense, like doing your lateral thoracic glides and you're trying to breathe well, right? Always think about when you're going into the harder thing, which would be in this case, right? It's in a stretch, it would be as you're going into the stretch, right? Or in this case, in a lateral thing, when I'm coming off of midline and I'm gliding in one direction. Think about exhaling during the harder thing. When it's harder, think about exhaling because exhaling calms you and allows you more movement, right? And like when the Dr. Higgins, the chiropractor that I work with there at this clinic and stuff, and sometimes I'll have to help him with somebody on the table, right? Because and I'm like, okay, we're getting ready to move in this. I'm like, exhale, right? And then we move them into a farther position. So think about exhaling when you're going into the movement that is harder would be one thing. The second would be you're going to read about that and see a bunch of videos on that in PB3, actually. When we get into the breathing habits of proper breathing during exercise, I go into a lot of that on when you're moving, how should you be breathing, actually. So there'll be a lot in that one. But yeah, it's hard if it's difficult at first, right? So even on these, if you're doing mobility drills and you're trying to breathe, at a minimum, think about just synchronizing your breathing with your movement. So like when the thoracic glides from PB1, we talk about inhaling as we're going into thoracic extension and then exhaling as we're going to the thoracic flexion, right? Think about synchronizing it with your movement. Something like lateral glides, it doesn't seem as obvious. But if you are synchronizing it with your movement, you're doing better. It's not like you're trying to do two things at the same time that aren't matched up. Does that help?
Yeah, it absolutely helps. It'll give me something to focus on for sure. And if I'm working with an athlete, I think I kind of need to capture that concept too, that when you get into the harder phase, um, and I guess injecting more of the parasympathetic with the exhalation, right? Like whatever the hard work is, use that to kind of peace of mind,
Yeah.
and it definitely makes sense.
It was like,
I just have to try it. I haven't been there.
yeah. Yeah. It's like even with the lateral glides, right? So if I'm gliding here and I'm exhaling, inhaling as I come back to neutral, exhaling as I go that direction, right?
Right.
And try to use that synchronization of breathing with the movement was what helps the most.
Thanks. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Let's go to breathing control. So the big point I'd like to want to bring up here, I mentioned it in the course. We don't go deep into it or anything, but breathing lives in your brain stem. So in the top picture, that red area, that is your brain stem. We're going to have a quiz on all those cranial nerves here in a second. On the lower picture, we won't go into it, but I bring that picture up to talk about how important the brain stem is. This is where all the autonomic functions happen, the things you don't think about. When people talk about lizard brain, you're talking about the brain stem and then a little bit higher too, and thalamus and some stuff like that, right? This as sensory input, right, so think all sensory input is coming up to and through the brainstem via the spinal cord or into the brainstem from the cranial nerves, because so you can see optic nerve as cranial nerve 2 there at the very top. That's actually anatomically considered just outside of the top of the brainstem. Cranial nerve 1's olfactory, smell, right? But smell, sight, hearings, cranial nerve 8, right? And balance, cranial nerve 8. Everything's coming in here before it goes up into the brain. And in this area of brain is going, is this safe? Is this safe? Is this information? Because everything you get, hearing me right now, right? The smell of your coffee, the taste of your coffee, your butt sitting on the seat you're sitting on, right? That is all sensory input that is coming in through this brainstem right now. Your brainstem's lit up all the time. And it's asking, is this safe, right? So breathing really lives in the brain. Nothing lives in one exact spot, always in the brain. As we find out more and more in the brain, it's a very interactive computer up there. But breathing, for the most part, lives in the brain. These three, the midbrain, and then the pons you can see there, and then the medulla, a little bit lower. Breathing lives in this area. So you can affect, this is why breathing affects the vagus nerve so much, which affects the gut. And when people have anxiety issues and things like that, and don't feel grounded, it's a insular lobe issue, which is a vagus nerve issue that's becoming more popular to talk about. This is why breathing affects vagus nerve so much, right? Because vagus nerve innervates heart and your lungs and things like that. And vagus nerve is a cranial nerve. So So I just mentioned that because we are stimulating in a positive way a really important part of your brain just for surviving the world and for your brain feeling good about what's going on, because this is the first danger area, like, where your brain will light up and when things are not good, right?
Hey,
The
Pat,
other, yeah,
can I share a huge win on that front with the vagus nerve?
yeah,
So a couple years ago, my heart rate variability was just super low. I was really in a distressed place. So I've been really intentionally working on vagus nerve tension, doing different mechanics to help myself there. And the year after that, it went up about 10. And in the last month of doing this program, it has been the highest it's ever been. And my sleep has been the best it's ever been. And my mind has been so I've been intentionally tracking that over time. And I was so curious on how this breath work would impact it. And there's an impact there. So just to the vagus nerve point, I was like, I got to share this with you guys because I think for me, it's been highly impactful in just my own well-being and strengthening that part of myself. So I'm a believer.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And so actually, you almost sound like we planted you in here on purpose. So like that is a perfect example of what I'm just talking about,
Yeah.
right? When neurons fire more, so you're doing so your neurons in your brainstem are firing when you're just sitting there breathing, and then when you do something more intentional, things are firing more. Your brain's getting more practice at doing that intentional thing, which then becomes more habitual. And in this area, because it's in the brainstem area, all these cranial nerves, and this is the autonomic area, right? Everything starts firing better, right? And so you're going to get a better result in those vagus nerve issues, right? Because the mechanics, in a sense, are working better. Circuitry might be a better analogy, but it's just working better. So that's awesome. That's a great point. You know, and with the breathing control, the triangle and the box breathing that we're doing in this one, neither of them super complicated. A lot of people have heard about them. And we talk about variations there. If you or athletes, right, and stuff like that are having trouble with them, you can just shrink the, instead of 3 seconds on the four or the three sides of the triangle, you go to 2 seconds, right? You can, there's no rule like, oh, box breathing has to be 4 4 4 4, right? You have to make it a win. That's important for your brain, because if things are too hard and we're exceeding that minimum effective dose all the time, the brain just goes, hey, I can't do that, right? But if you make it possible, even if it's difficult and challenging, but you can still be successful, then that's when the gains start coming easier and easier. We start making basically neuroplasticity happen in someone's brain. In this case, with regards to breathing, right, and how well they're breathing and how well they control. So this kind of control aspect of with a triangle or box breathing and being able to do that for several minutes, that's displaying the ability of being comfortable with a little bit of air hunger, and then being able to control. What it translates to is control in tough situations, like in the third period on the wrestling mat, or in mile 26 on a marathon, or whenever things are getting really bad. When you own more control over it, then you can bring yourself back to a calmer state, even if you're still in the activity, and be able to perform better.
Julie, have you noticed, like, is there an intentionality with your sleep? Like, I took the course, I understand the course, and now as I'm laying in bed, if I'm having stress or like, how is the intentionality of using breath work at sleep? How's that been?
Noticeable for sure. I'll often catch myself doing just box breathing or triangle breathing as I'm, just kind of laying down I usually put some like alpha waves on or some sort of frequency on to sleep to now as well. But I've also noticeably been nasal breathing, which has been a huge change for me at rest. Is when I sleep at night, I'm like, man, I could totally do. I need to get some tape because I'm just really curious. That used to be a fear for me. Is like I could never tape my mouth shut at night. Oh my gosh, that just seems suffocating. Where now I'm like, I need to get some tape because I feel like I naturally fall asleep nasal breathing. So there's some intentionality in more of that triangle breathing and even the pursed lip breathing at night right before I go to bed. And I think that has been really impactful as a result of this course. It's just brought that awareness in that space. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, just I think that's, we talk a lot in the courses about the habits, like how do you take
Yeah.
this knowledge and then transition it into, and so it's great to hear that you're getting better results. And kind of why is that? Oh, well, you're more intentional about drills. You have a better understanding of the
Oh,
yourself. That's awesome.
totally. The other thing I've been doing is planks. So that was something I really struggled with a couple of years ago. I could hold like a 15-second plank and then I just feel winded. Yesterday, my little kid timed me. I made it to 2 minutes, all closed mouth, all nasal breathing, thinking box breathe or triangle breath. And that was really liberating. Like I feel stronger physically without doing high intense workouts, which for an athlete, and I've always just been conditioned to do the more high intense, like I feel more conditioned properly because of the breath work and my ability to strengthen without having to like overventilate. um, so
Right.
that's been an interesting correlation that I've noticed as well as just the intentional breath work and how it's been translating to me just feeling stronger altogether.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. And especially any kind of, what we consider core work, right? I mean, once you, especially these breathing muscles, right? Once you really understand that, I mean, that's really core musculature, to a great degree.
I've done nothing else to strengthen my core but the breath work in the last, 4 weeks, and the plank has improved consistently. So I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to experiment with myself. So that's one way I've been experimenting.
Yeah. So before I go on to the next one, any other questions on the breathing control stuff?
Would it be okay if so I have a really hard time now with the 3 and 4 seconds. It's like 6 to 8 seconds that I want to do. Is it okay to move in the opposite direction? And is that a sign of progress for like our athletes? If they're like, hey, coach, like 3 seconds almost feels too short for me. Can I prolong that? I'm assuming that's okay too, Pat, to just kind of move in that other direction, not the shorter direction.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the breathing version of putting weights on the barbell.
Right.
Just making that, and it just displays more control, right? It all comes down to, us being control freaks, right? With our breathing and our ability. And so playing with it in different ways is totally fine. Increasing, going to a 6-6, 6-6 on the box or higher or whatever is really good. I'll talk about, got a couple of interesting slides, a big guy in the breathing space with a little device I'll talk about here in a second that I was doing the same kind of thing. Yeah. All right. So getting into the breathing habits. So we have the 2 breathing habits in performance breathing 2 are unconscious nasal breathing and then just having fewer breaths per minute. So first, let's talk about the nasal breathing. Probably cannot be overemphasized on how important this is. I mean, if you're like, hey, Pat, you can tell somebody only one thing they need to do better to breathe better. It would be, for me, it would be nasal breathing and not even talking about the diaphragm. As important as the diaphragm is. The nasal breathing is the most important thing. As you saw on there, and I recently was talking to a different group on a bunch of breathing stuff. So if I feel like I'm repeating myself, so if I've mentioned some of this stuff, let me know, right? But I talk in there about the 4 reasons why nasal breathing is better than mouth breathing, right? It filters the air, it warms the air, it humidifies the air, and you get nitric oxide, all of which you do not get when you inhale through the mouth, right? So it just super, super important. This is built to breathe, right? This is a backup, right? It's eating and talking, right? And then breathing. So it is huge. It's the most important thing. Mouth taping that you mentioned, Julie. I've been doing it for probably 6 years now. I've got a deviated septum. And so I would often get stuffed up. I would not get sick a lot, like, flu or colds or things like that, but I would be stuffed up a lot and not able to breathe through my nose, laying down and going to sleep. Since I've been taping my mouth shut, I could count on one hand in 6 years how many nights I couldn't tape my mouth because my nose was stuffed up. I never feel like I can't breathe through my nose now, right? So it's I don't know if there's any science on this one. It'd be amazing to do some kind of like a X-ray or some kind of imaging on people's nasal passages, and then look a year later after they do focused nasal breathing or something like that to see if they actually open up more. My guess would be yes. It certainly feels that way with me. It's huge. And so how do we make that a habit? Well, when we're doing the breathing exercises, we're doing that conscious nasal inhales. The mouth taping's obviously another one. If you're like me and you have to talk a lot during the day, you're not nasal breathing when you're talking. So how do I balance that out, right? And for me, taping my mouth shut at night is giving me, depending on the night, 6 to 8 hours of nasal breathing, right? Which is then, also driving better oxygenation because it's a vasodilator, dilates the airways as well, and things like that. In PB3, the next one, we'll talk a little bit about the nasal breathing. Well, actually, in this one, I did talk about it, right? How you can nasal breathe for set activity or based on exertion. Did either of you guys have questions on that? You want me to explain it a little bit more? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. You're basically just going, okay, I'm gonna do all my activity just nasal breathing in and out through my nose, right? And it's gonna feel harder and it will get easier. And then you're gonna see some tremendous change with being able to do that.
A quick question, again, kind of going back before we go much further with the nasal breathing. My question is, I too have had several issues with deviated septums personally, and so I've done a lot of homework on the idea of mouth taping, which I 100% understand the benefits, but there seems to be a lot of controversy in regards to the safety of it, especially at night. And I was just curious, your insights. I think if I could get past that fear, I've had a couple pretty hardline, serious surgeries on it, and I'm kind of back to where I was with the deviated septum issue. But I would still like to experiment with it, but I'm a little bit nervous in that regards.
Sure.
Or is there other alternatives other than just, practice so that when I do go to sleep, my body responds neurologically more towards using nasal breathing, and would that transfer over? So I guess I'm kind of caught in that. I don't know where to go with this one.
Yeah. So a couple things. One is not like I'm using duct tape, right? I'm using like paper tape.
Mhm.
Like the kind of tape you get after you get some blood drawn and they put the little cotton swab and they put that little paper tape. That's
Right.
what I'm using. The very first night it was just funny. The very first night I did it, I had a dream where I had to yell and my mouth just came open. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, it won't, it can't keep your mouth shut if you're using that kind of tape, right? It would be one thing. Secondly, there is a version of mouth taping, a brand, I should say, right, of sleep tape. I'll call it that, sleep tape, called hostage tape, which is an unfortunate name, right?
Yeah.
I think they do it for the shock value, but it's actually like an oval of tape, right? So it goes basically around your lips, but you could, with it on, actually still open your mouth completely, right? And my sister actually uses that. She's a big fan of their stuff, of their tape. So usually the tape, like I used to buy the specific sleep tape and stuff like that, and then I was out, and hadn't bought some, and so I was rummaging through my drawer in the bathroom and found some paper tape and started using that. I'm like, well, this is like $3 at Walgreens, so I'll just keep using this, right? And I used to tape across. My daughter tapes this way, and then I started playing with that, and I actually like that, and I just put a piece of tape like that right over there now.
Hmm.
So I totally get that it would feel, especially if you've had nasal issues, right?
Mhm.
That it would feel threatening. My advice would be to one, try the hostage tape, which is the one with the opening, right? Two, play with it during the day. Obviously, you can't do that when you're with athletes or you're coaching or you're doing other things. But if you just got time on the computer or you're doing something else, right? Play with it during the day. Just get used to that, right? And then it becomes less threatening in a totally easy environment of being awake and things like that. And then thirdly, you could just put it on at night and like, okay, I'm just going to lay here for about 5 minutes, do a little bit of breathing with this on, and then I'm going to take it off, stick it on the nightstand, right? And ease your way into that. Does that help?
It helps tremendously. Those are some great suggestions, and I kind of need a kick in the ass to get a little bit of confidence too to maybe go ahead and give it a shot. And if I can ease into it, like even maybe like during meditation practices, or that might be a kind of a segue into using it in the evenings.
Definitely. That'd be a great segue, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Just get used to that, the feeling of that, right? Even though again, it's not duct tape, but that feeling of it. And then that's going to have a huge impact on your autonomic nervous system and have on a positive impact in the parasympathetic side, kind of like, oh, okay, this is no big deal. Okay, I'm okay with this, right? Give yourself some space to figure it out, because the subconscious brain is powerful and job one is survival, not being awesome. So, and breathing, pretty important to survival. So,
It's sort of sometimes it's a perfect storm too, because I was just doing some more homework on it yesterday and kind of had some confidence, and then I read a little bit more and I lost my confidence, and it's like, damn it.
yeah.
But I feel better now. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, there's always going to be people that that have a differing opinion. And if you ever, look at studies for health and fitness and strength and conditioning, stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that, you can find a study for anything you want to say, right? But yeah, it's pretty solid proven at this point and stuff like that. It's about being comfortable with it, right? And again, don't use duct tape.
Don't use duct tape.
Yeah. Yeah. The fewer breaths per minute, right, that's basically what we're looking for in a sense, right? To be more efficient breathing. We are not efficient if we're breathing 16, 17, 18 times a minute. Like inhale, exhale, right? So we want more efficiency, which is then gonna give us the better ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide. And that is what the timed breathing exercises, triangle breathing, box breathing, right? The pursed lip, 2 in, 4 out, even that is getting us to fewer breaths per
I
minute.
actually, I work with a client that the other day, I was going through some of his stats that I got off of one of his wearables that I've convinced him those are powerful tools. They're not always 100% accurate, but good tools. And his breath work that I saw come back was absolutely horrendous during sleep, was at 32 breaths per minute. And it's like, to me, that's almost alarming. Like there's some real serious issues going on. And he has had some serious health issues, but this has never been tracked before. And when I saw it, just red flags went off. Like we've got some issues that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a lot.
Yeah, more. That's the most I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot for sure. And just the rhythmic walking that I talk about in the course, right? It's a great way to start getting used to a little bit more actively or consciously breathing less per minute too, right? I'm just kind of inhaling over 2 steps. I'm exhaling over 2 steps. I'm inhaling over 2 steps, and then just making that a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Inhaling over 3 steps, exhaling over 3 steps. You get to about 5 and you're like, okay, I'm working now. But it's just a way of consciously, again, bringing your attention to the breathing process. And it's something that we all do every day, walk, right? You could do this going into Walmart and walking back out to your car, right? Those kind of things. This is how you tweak it in, right? When you're walking the dog, this is what I'm doing, right? To just kind of keep that measured breathing and focus on not only fewer breaths per minute, but also synchronizing my breathing with movement, right? Because if I'm doing this consciously while I'm walking the dog, I'm going to be doing it more unconsciously when I'm on a run, right? Right. So I can't remember off the top of my head at the end of PB2 which books it is, because we kind of recommend books in the resources module or in section there. Can't remember if both of these are on there, but I wanted to bring both of these guys up. They're both great books. I don't know if you guys have read these, but Nestor's book, James Nestor's book, Breathe or Breath, has just an awesome bunch of great stories. And in his book, he talks about doing an experiment with this other guy, Anders Olsen, right? Where I can't remember, they were at Stanford or something like that. And they did a week where they had their nostrils stuffed and taped closed. And the scientist was, running all kinds of measures of health and physiology on them, right? They were doing stationary bike work with their, noses plugged basically and stuff. And they did that for a week. And in that week, every measure of good health for them plummeted. Their blood pressure, their sleep, because they were measuring sleep stuff with a bunch of things with them and stuff like that. But I mean, like everything plummeted, right? When they were breathing through their mouth. And then they unplug. Then they did the opposite for a week, right? They basically kind of except for eating, had their mouths taped for like a week. And everything shot up as far as measures of good health. Yeah. So just really interesting. Anders Olsen, his website is Conscious Breathing. Highly suggest it. He has sleep tape. That's great. That's the one I used to use all the time. His sleep that comes in little strips where you peel a strip off, right? Send like 30-day supplies. He also makes a really cool little device called a Relaxador. It's a little thing you can put in your mouth, or you have a dial where you can turn it to make it easier, harder to exhale of. And so it drives a nasal inhale with long, protracted mouth exhales. Yep, right there. Right, great little device. I use it with clients all the time. It's fun to use. I'll use it in my car sometimes. I've got to the point where I've got the hole, the slot closed to the point where it's just a very tiny thing where I was inhaling for 2 and exhaling for 18 as I was driving to work, which is sometimes tough when you're driving. But yeah, but that it's a great little device for helping you really get those long exhales against a little bit of resistance. We talked about using a straw and pursed lip breathing, and this thing's just a little bit more, a little bit cooler and kind of fun to use in some different ways. But those are both fantastic books, and the power of nasal breathing is really talked about in both of them. So program, you saw we kind of have two programs. We're adding more exercises. If you can do them all in a day, awesome. Program 1. If you need to split it up, kind of halvesies, right? And for kind of going through 14 days of doing it, that's what program 2 is for. Just people with a little less time. You guys are kind of going through this, one after the other. When we first built this with these three programs, thought, well, some people are going to buy PB1 and then might be months later, right? Before they do performance breathing 2. So we kind of want to give some advice on what to do after, okay, I've gone through 14 days where I've really practiced these new breathing things, and so as you see in the course, but I just threw it up here, for the next couple of weeks, you're not doing it every day. You're going to give yourself a couple of days off. Maybe it's the weekend, just trying to do it 5 days a week. And then for 4 to 6 weeks after that, just, 3 to 5 times a week, just working on it. I will tell you that I don't do this stuff every day or every other day anymore because I've done it for so long. Like all these things are habits now, right? Diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing, stuff like that. But I do other things, other breathing focused training, for different aspects. So I'm doing it every week in one way or the other, right? And it's a matter of once it becomes a habit, then you really do. It doesn't take a lot to keep it, I've found, which is cool, with breathing. Once you've got a habit, it doesn't take a lot to keep it, but you got to get it to habit level first, right? That's the key. All right. New quote. Rest assured that the great secret of life is the breathing principle, for which nature has rightly prepared the material and the proper mode of using it. Have you guys heard of George Catlin? So he's in James Nestor's book, Breath, right? And this is such a cool story. This guy was this is like the 1830s to the 1850s in America. Guy was like an attorney on the East Coast. He's like, man, I want to be a painter. So he decides he wants to go paint portraits of Native Americans. So in the 1830s, if you were out in Kansas, right, you're in the Midwest, you were living with Native American Indians, right? It was still not, all the cowboy movies we think of, most of those are post-Civil War, right? So in the 1830s, it was still pretty rugged out there. He goes out by himself and encounters all these different tribes, Sioux, Crow, etc. And he's painting them. And in fact, his paintings and his diary and his journals are some of the best history we have on the Plains Indians, because then everything happened real quick as we moved out west more, right? And he was out there by himself with them. But what was interesting is he realized they all breathe in through their nose all the time. They keep their mouth shut all the time. He actually wrote this book, right, and had published and because he saw living, I believe he lived in London for a while too, and then of course he was like New York or Boston, something like that, all these more industrial or cities and stuff like that, where everybody had terrible, many different issues, right? Terrible teeth was a big one at the time. A lot of that comes from poor breathing patterns, actually. So it was super interesting on it. And he always had respiratory issues. And so he kind of learned from the Native Americans that he encountered about nasal breathing and sleeping in the right position that keeps your head slightly tilted so that you don't, right? And start doing that. And how they would, if their babies, and this is why he had this picture on the cover, if their baby was sleeping and started and breathing through his mouth, the mother would pinch the lips shut. Right? Until it started breathing through his nose, But just he was blown away by it. So he wrote, so I ended up, you can actually get his book off of Amazon. The first copy I've got it was literally photocopies of his handwritten book, which is really hard to read. So I don't suggest getting that copy. But really cool, interesting story on just the power of nasal breathing and how, and that was focused on, right? That was with the Native Americans. That was something, this is where when we call somebody a mouth breather and it's a pejorative, right? This is where that comes from. Okay. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, performance reading 3, what you're going to see, right? Still some more upper rib breathing. It's actually the pec minor muscle, right? Lays underneath the pec major, connects to the ribs 3, 4, and 5, right? We're going to learn how to breathe up into the upper ribs. Obviously, we all want to be diaphragm breathers, but when we need more air, right, we want the entire rib cage to be able to move. So we're going to learn how to breathe into the kind of upper front rib area, and then some rib mobility drills, right, to get the ribs to be able to bucket handle out a little bit more. We call that some stair step breathing, 2 stair step breathing drills. The breathing control is something I call the ideal breath. I basically kind of made it up. It's about using 1 breath in 10 seconds, right? That gets you down to 6 breaths per minute. And so that's I'll use this one. I think Julie, you were talking about it. Well, I think Mike, you were too, on doing some different things and then trying to use breathing control. This is the one, the breathing control exercise I kind of use if I'm doing anything where I have to really try to calm down and just and something a little bit more static, like the planks. Like if I'm doing dead hangs off of a bar, I'm doing this, or if I'll go into a wrestler's bridge and try to hold that for 2 minutes and using this breathing exercise or that breathing control drill. And then the breathing habits, I think you guys are going to like this one a lot. The proper breathing during exercise, we're going to talk about aerobic and anaerobic exercise. And Mike, some of the things you were asking, you're going to see that in there on coordinating breathing with movement. That's really important stuff. And once you get that, it kind of makes everything a little bit easier. It's not that you still can't push yourself hard to that you're breathing hard, but you're like, oh wow, I wish I would have known this, because what do we generally say? Exhale when you're exerting, right? Because that keeps us safe in the weight room. At least you're not holding your breath and the bar comes down on your head or your chest or something like that. It's not the worst advice ever, but it's not the best advice. So we'll go into it. And then how to use breathing to do recovery breathing to quickly recover your breathing rate, which is important for really power and performance sports mostly, so you can recover your breathing rate and continue to be awesome on the field. Good questions today. Some good conversations. Appreciate it.
one last meeting, obviously, in 2 weeks. And again, the questions have been great. We will get the this video out to you so you can have it for your records, and then also we'll ask for those questions leading up to number 3. Although this has been a good way to do it too, I think, has been, the questions throughout the slides. So that's the, coming to the end of this first cohort, and any info and insights that you guys have both on the content and the delivery. You are our super users, so that would be anything you have will be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. We're not, anything that's like literally in the course on Thinkific and things like that too. I mean, we're just always looking to improve. So any things that jump out like, oh, I didn't like that, or I really like that, or whatever, it's all good. It's all good data for us.
And we'll be starting that next cohort on June 28th. So certainly some opportunities. If you've got some other folks that you'd like to get involved with us, we can share that information with Anthony and get them signed up. You guys have been great too. This has been such a super pilot for us. Like, just
Yeah.
really cool. Thank you for all you're doing. It's really neat.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you guys.
See you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.